Here of the World Endurance Podcast on the PCS Race Sports Gaming channel. This is another new podcast that is replacing the Overwatch League because the Overwatch League ceased operations at the end of last year, which is so sad. But I'm Daniel Boza. Alongside me is the happiest panelist that is grateful to join me for the World Endurance Podcast. He is from Wallace, Indiana, Mr. Zachary Taylor.
Alrighty then.
Hey, the producers had to give me that title, so I had to read it. But anyway, welcome to our first ever episode of the World Endurance Podcast. This has been long in awakening. Today we are going to recap the Qatar race, which was a really interesting race. We're going to rate the race, discuss more about the 2024 schedule. By the way, I will send this to you in your DM, Taylor. The schedule, nothing that you need to see. And then we'll preview the 6 hours of, normally it would be Monza, but because they're doing repair work at the Autodromo de Monza, they're going to the Emilia-Romagna track for F1 home in Imola. So there you go. So, yeah. So, Taylor, let's talk about Qatar. Are you surprised Qatar was the season opener for the World Endurance?
I kind of is a bit of a moment.
Oh, let's tell you about how that race went. That race was bonkers. They ran for 1,812 kilometers, or if you do the math, Taylor, it's 10 hours. So they had 10 hours of racing at Qatar. Yeah, it's called the Qatar 1812 kilometers, or in other words, it's a 10-hour race. So it's almost like the Petit Le Mans, almost. But it's under a 6-year contract. So, and it was announced as the 6 hours of Qatar, but it was preceded by the prologue, which is now the 10-hour race. So, yeah. And and the reason it was 1812 kilometer was Qatar's national day of 18th of December. So it's a time limit of 10 hours. We had a very interesting race here. It was 335 laps, which the race was completed in 9 hours, 55 minutes, 51.926 seconds. And it was a Porsche 123 with Hertz Toyota coming in second. Penske Porsche got the win. The two Cadillac VR ended up off the podium. The 499P, the Toyota GR0110, and the 93 Peugeot, who, by the way, was ahead of those two cars, were disqualified because, well, of a technical the race. As I don't know why the deal was gone, but anyway. It was an interesting race. What's your thoughts, Taylor, about the Qatar 10-hour race? We're going to definitely call it, or in this term, the Qatar 1812.
Definitely, there was a lot of really interesting things that happened.
One of the Ferrari prototypes lost the rear wing. By the way, that brought out the first full course caution, and how everybody didn't hit that debris. I'm surprised, but go on.
But definitely, it was a real interesting race weekend, and definitely some bro moments happened. And definitely, I would say overall, it was a good race, and definitely it was interesting and wild. That's for sure.
Yeah, they introduced some brand new tire compounds for this class. They have like the softs and the I think it's the softs and the hards, but they have it under different colors, which by the way are supplied by Michelin and Goodyear. So that's interesting, if you ask me.
Yeah.
This is, by the way, their 12th season. Can you believe they've been doing this for 12 seasons? That's incredible.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So, and also this is replacing the 1,000 miles of Sebring that we normally discuss on this channel, but it's not coming back, which is sad. So yeah, so their schedule. Now that we're getting, let's rate the race before we talk about the rest of the schedule. What would you rate the Qatar 1,812 kilometer or the 10 hours of Qatar, Taylor? From 1 to 10, as usual.
I will give it a 7.5.
I will give it a 7. I thought it was a good one. So, yeah. So let's talk about the schedule. We had the prologue at Qatar. That was ran a week ago. I will message Sean after we're done taping this portion of our broadcast. So we had the Qatar 1,812 or 10-hour race, as we're discussing about the schedule. So the rest of the calendar, as we look at it, next race I talked about was Imola, which we're going to actually preview that in just a second. 6 hours of Spa-Francorchamps. That's it. That's coming up in May 11th. So that is the only race in May. The big one, Zachary Taylor, the 24 Hours of Le Mans at Circuit de la Sarre, June 15th through the 16th. Here's the best part. On my birthday, July 14th, they're racing at Interlagos at Sao Paulo for 6 hours. That's fun. And then they take the entire month of August off as they go racing at COTA for the Lone Stars Le Mans. I want to see how long that race is going to be. That race is going to be a 6-hour race, which I may end up doing that on this channel probably Saturday night, I want to say. I'll be running the number 26 Corvette in that race as a preview, so you'll get to see my worst driving style, even though I don't care about that. Then the penultimate round will be 2 weeks later as they head to Fuji Speedway, which used to host the Japanese Grand Prix for F1. By the way, as of this taping, if you want a little more preview of what happened this weekend in F1, don't forget to tune in later late tonight. We're going to discuss this on Triple P, so just a little FYI. So they go to Fuji Speedway, and then the track that F1, which we will discuss more of that on Triple P, Bahrain, which is the 8-hour race to end off the season. That will be on November 2nd. So what do you think about this schedule? About Qatar being the opener, now we're going to Imola, then we go to Belgium, Le Mans, Sao Paulo, Coda, Fuji, and the track F1 just got done racing out in Bahrain, which we'll discuss more on Triple P. But what's your thoughts?
Definitely that it's an interesting schedule, and definitely there's some really good tracks on that schedule. So definitely it's going to be a fun set of races for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love the diverse. You know, you have some European races, which is kind of not surprising. Some Asia races we have on there, and then you have the only American race, which is Circa the Americas. So that's going to be a fun one. And then, of course, Brazil, and then Bahrain is going to be interesting. So we start in the Middle East and we end in the Middle East, which is really good. But you know, I really like the new tire compounds for the World Endurance. Um, for the GT cars. And it's really an interesting how strategy will come the 24 hours of Le Mans with those tire compounds. I don't know if they have to use both sets of those compounds during the race. I don't know how they do that as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, definitely. That new tire compound definitely could make things interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's something new. I mean, I saw the tire compounds. I'm like, I really am curious how this is going to work, if you know what I mean. But you know, it's going to be interesting how the rest of the season go with various tracks. You know, so it's going to be like, oh, how's this going to play to fuel mileage, pitch strategy, blah 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 blah. It's going to be interesting, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
Speaking of Imola. As I go back to my agenda, and like I said, I got pinged from a server I'm not going to talk about. That has nothing to do with racing. So we've already recapped, we've already discussed. Speaking of Imola, let's talk about Imola, because last time the FIA was at Imola was 2 years ago. Of course, they didn't have any F1 races last year. I apologize for my phone going off, which I will smack it later. Let's start that over again. Imola had no racing last year because of the whole flooding situation. Hopefully they don't have that happen this time around. And of course, it's outside the city of San Marino. So with this going from Monza, that's normally home of the 6-hour race, what do you expect for this 6-hour race at Imola instead?
Definitely. I think we could see some really good racing happening. Definitely. I think the drivers are gonna definitely have to be careful with some of the curves there, and to not over drive the corners and get off track. Definitely, you don't want to get stuck in any sand traps or anything like that. So definitely, I think it'll be an interesting race, and definitely be interesting to see what kind of strategies come in with that new tire compound as well.
Yeah, the compounds are going to be really interesting because you know we don't know how. I mean, the circuit's really going to be a big interesting how it's going to play out with tires. But you know, and also the weather could also play a factor. So don't forget the wet weather tires that could play in the factor. And you know, it's going to be interesting because, like I said, you know, you have that quick turn one, and then you're coming into, as I'm going to pull up the track map, by the way. Our track maps for the World Endurance Podcast brought to you by Coke Zero. Real Coca-Cola tastes 0 calories. So let's look at the Imola track description. This is something we're going to do for every race this season. So this is a so this is a 19 turn fun track. Variante Bassa, which is, by the way, the French straightaway. Of course, turn one is flat out, as usual. And then you go to the Tamburello chicane, where you got to make sure, as you said it, Taylor, stay off the curbs in that 2-3-4 section. Then you have Villeneuve, which is that 5-6, that quick left-right deal. And then going into Tosa, really important to get a good exit off of Tosa, because you're going to Paratella, which is turn 9. And then into turn 10 down the hill towards Aqua Minerale, which is 11, 12, and 13. And then the Alta chicane, which is that right-left, which you got to get a good exit off of 15 if you want to get an overtake into Ravazza. And then you got to get a good exit off Ravazza down the Bassa straightaway, and then heading back to Tamburello. So really important, as that's, by the way, a lap around the Imola circuit, even though it used to be called the San Marino Grand Prix, but now it's called the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. So yeah. Last time they raced there is 2011. So it's a lot. It's been a long time. 13 years it's been. Can you believe that, Taylor? 13 years. So this will be the second annual 6 Hours of Imola, but we're going to see how good of a race that's going to be, if you know what I mean. And it's been 70 years since that circuit opened. That's incredible. So, since you mentioned about this track and the curves, what are your keys to the race? By the way, keys to the race brought to you by Michelin, A Better Way Forward, proud sponsor of the tire compound of the World Endurance. What's your keys to the race, Taylor, as far as your 3 keys? One of them, you nailed it on the head. Got to stay on course.
Yeah, definitely. I think that definitely, I think, will be one of my keys. You don't want to overdrive the corners and get off track, definitely. And so I think definitely staying on the racetrack is definitely going to be important. And so definitely not over driving the turns and stuff is going to be key as well. And I think something that really will be interesting to watch is what kind of strategies these teams try with this new tire compound. And so hopefully we don't see a lot of tires going down and stuff like that.
Or full course yellow like what we had at Qatar.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have a good set of tires for all the drivers and teams to use. And so hopefully we don't have any tire issues.
You know what my key will be? The weather. We don't know what kind of weather we're going to have for the month of April, especially this race being on April, which, by the way, this is April 16th as of this taping that you're seeing on YouTube. So it's been a long time. It's been a while since the Qatar race, because you're going from the hot desert of the Middle East of Qatar, which, let's face it, Qatar and Bahrain, we know it's going to be a dry race, but with the sand blowing on the track and yada, yada, yada. This one is going to be, whether or not we're going to see a lot of rain in the area. Will that also play a factor? Could we see rain? Could we see that blue tire that comes into play and all that yada, yada, yada? Because rain could play a factor in that race, and it could happen at any point. So, I think that's going to be my key to the race is weather. You know, how can you keep, how long will it rain? How long is it going to rain? Will it not rain? Blah, 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 blah. I mean, we don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see what kind of weather we're going to see for this race here in April. So, that's something we're going to have to keep our eyes on, Taylor.
Yeah, definitely. Weather definitely could come into play and be a factor, no doubt.
So it's going to be interesting to see what happens um, in that race coming up this weekend here at Imola. So going to be a really important race so far. Well, Mr. Taylor, any final thoughts you want to say before we get this Imola party started for 6 hours?
Well, definitely. I think it's going to be interesting to see what does happen in that race, and ready to see some good racing in Imola. Yeah!
Want to mention a couple of things before we get out of here. There was 50, I think it was 57 drivers, I think for, I don't know if it was the prototypes or the LMGT class, but that's a big size field, if you know what I mean, for those drivers. Also, hopefully, if you're the number 6 Penske car, hopefully your DHL sticker will stay on for 6 hours and not come peeling off, because that's what happened to it. But you know, and the thing is, and as you mentioned, is that, you know, gravel. I mean, you don't want to drag the gravel back on the circuit. Plus, this track doesn't have lights, unlike Qatar, where it has lights all the way around. So that's going to be something you and I are going to talk about. So, yeah, let's see. The red one is, I believe, the hards, and the yellow one, I believe, is the soft for the LMGT3 cars, is what I saw. But it's going to be interesting to see how this race is going to develop. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So, yes. All right. With that being said, Mr. Taylor, here's the. There was 54 drivers for the LMGT3 for that Qatar race, and then there were 57 hypercar drivers. So if you did the math, let's see, 57 plus 54 is what? Hopefully it's not, well, it's not going to be on that cursed number. I'll just give you that. There was 111 drivers there, which is not too bad for an endurance race. Wait till we have a lot more come the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So should be an interesting race so far. With that being said, that is going to basically do it. I can't wait for the rest of the season. Join us in May, which is next month, the month of May, as we will discuss about the 6 hours of Imola with Zachary Taylor and myself. We're going to rate the races, talk about who is hot for after the first 2 races and who is not. And then we preview the race, which I need to actually go back to the calendar here. We're going to preview the 6 hours of Spa from Belgium. So that's going to make things a little interesting, Taylor. But you and I are definitely looking forward to that. That will be coming up next month. That will be on May 6th at noon Eastern Standard Time. This is when this podcast will be, when our next podcast will be coming out. And yeah, that will be very interesting indeed. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the World Endurance Podcast, episode number 1, with me and Zachary Taylor, as always. One little note I'll mention, the prologue was supposed to be February 24th and 25th, but it was delayed due to shipping issues, so not a big deal. But anyway, want to thank you guys a lot for joining us for the first episode of the World Endurance Podcast, as they have begun year 12 for this category, which is awesome. If you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like. If you haven't considered subscribing yet, I highly recommend you do so, in order to keep up with some wonderful content coming out in the near future, as well as future episodes of your favorite podcast coming out throughout the rest of this week and onward to the next. For Zachary Taylor, I'm Dean Evolos, aka Blue Hedgehog 26, signing off, and I say this famous line: we survived another awesome podcast. We'll see you on Wednesday for Triple P. in coming up on Wednesday. That will be a lot of fun. So we'll see you then, and we'll see you on the next World Endurance podcast. Until then, so long. Take care, everybody.